gets here. Yeah, so it's always such a, I'm profoundly curious whenever we do expand. And it is always such a powerful playground.
Mhm.
All right. As soon as T gets here, well, we're going to talk about success. We're going to talk about what success means for us. Sure, she's.
Can you call her in?
Oh, there we go. Good thinking, Teresa. Hi, welcome back.
Where do we all go? Whoa.
No, I'll take responsibility. I hit the wrong button. All right, let me share screen.
May I ask, one thing we were talking about when we were doing the switching over is, Tess, could you repeat solitude for gratitude or gratitude for solitude?
Gratitude for solitude.
Gratitude for solitude. Can you talk a little bit more? Just
Well, when I was at the Modern Elder Academy in New Mexico, one of the lovely things about it was so far out in the desert that when we weren't in class and people weren't wandering around, all I could experience was nature. And it was quiet, and it was the leaves on the cottonwood trees and a hummingbird wandering around. And it was just a really, really, and instead of being lonely, you can be alone and not lonely, is really appreciating what solitude has available for us. So I mentioned that phrase in one of the little groups that we had, and the fellow we were in a triad, and this guy was like, "Oh, I love that. Can I borrow that?" It's like, it's not mine. Whatever is, and that's been a big lesson for me is my ego would like me to think that I get credit for everything that comes through me. And I remember going to see my coach one day when I was really on it about somebody else who, kind of like they stole my idea. And she goes, "Oh, you thought it was yours?" So gratitude for solitude, the ability to be alone and not lonely, but just present. Does that make sense?
thank you. Yes.
100%. Do you think it's a skill that we build?
Yeah, I think that that's part of the whole intention around mindfulness is
Yeah.
is to be, because I think for most people you get, then all of your thoughts come up, all of the ego's judgments and limitations and all of that, and it's like, yeah, thoughts are real, but they're not necessarily true.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of capabilities we can build.
Yeah. Agreed.
I felt so strongly about that in my book I actually did a piece on that, because I feel like loneliness is so portrayed as a negative thing, as opposed to it, that solitude, with mindfulness can be just so incredibly supportive and powerful and everything. And that loneliness does not, I just lost my thought. But anyway, I felt like it was important to talk about that, just because I think that there's this stereotype out there that for me, for instance, with depression, it was well, if you're depressed, then you're lonely. But yet sometimes in what felt like loneliest times, those were also very rich times, in a positive way. So I don't know. I felt like it was important to say, there's another way to look at it.
And do you think that loneliness is a byproduct of worthiness?
I think loneliness is a real, doesn't have to be to your point, Cindy, it doesn't have to be a negative thing.
Yeah.
I think you can yearn for company
Mhm.
because we're designed for connection. So
Mhm.
I think loneliness can actually, from a paradoxical point of view, can be a communication from the larger system that you need to rebalance, renew, and expand, which would mean I need to have more connection in my life. That's what loneliness is, as opposed to Cindy's point, a statement about I am in this state of depression. Loneliness
Mhm.
equals depression, or depression equals loneliness, when in fact, if you shift it from an identity statement to an experience that is happening, I am
Yeah.
having an experience, not I am depressed, but I'm having feelings of depression. So for me now, most of the negative feelings, if I can relate to them as, oh, here's an experience that if I think about the larger system is always renewing and rebalancing and experience, etc. What is it that I need? What is it? What is it the larger system is saying I need right now? And I need some company.
Yeah.
Maybe I just need some company. I need to call a friend. I need a connection with another human, etc. As opposed,
Yeah.
and then you can move it to an upward spiral as opposed to a downward spiral, right?
Yeah.
So I'm really, really watching identity statements.
Yeah.
Really
There.
watching, because the ego goes, yep, you're depressed. Got it. Here's what depressed looks like, so hunker down. It's like you cannot, well, then I could be wrong because I don't have experience with clinical depression, so I don't know that. But I remember in the old days of neurolinguistic programming with Tony Robbins, if you look up like this and you smile, try to get depressed. You can't do it unless you change your physiology.
I think it's contextual, and
Yep.
like you said, Teresa, it's if we can teach kids that loneliness is an indicator that you need connection, then their relationship with loneliness will be very different than what I grew up with, or you guys may have grown up with. Yeah, everything's contextual, and I am statements. I am this, I am that, I am, I am, I am. There, we have to be, it's optimal to be intentional with them.
When you were talking about expansion and contraction, I couldn't help but pull up the model that I've created for the work of the Enneagram of Paradox, which is an infinity loop that includes the arrow direction from, in the context of duality in the larger system and impermanence. There is a direction filter to this polarity game, which is from the strengths of one polar opposite. Eventually, because of impermanence, it's moving, and the direction it's moving in is the waning of the strain. So contraction in its wonderfulness.
Yeah.
If there's no attention to expansion, eventually contraction will become stuck and rigid and lonely and all of that. And we tend to identify with it. Oh, I'm lonely, as opposed to, oh, what if this is not a statement about who I am, but it's really a communication from the larger system that it's time to just relax with this, because it's going to move, and it's going to move over to expansion, because it has to move to its polar opposite. And if I'm in expansion and I'm going, yay, it's getting bigger, it's wonderful, everything is going on. If I have no attention to contraction at all, or willing for it, it'll eventually wane. So I pulled up this model, and then it has these questions. What if it's a communication from the larger system? What if it has nothing to do with me and my worth and my identity or my goodness?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a communication from your own system.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
yeah.
given that in this model,
We're
I am
unity.
the spark of the divine, I am never separate from the larger system. So any communication from the larger system includes my system,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And it is, you mentioned, you started this piece with, it's always contextual.
Yeah.
So expansion and contraction in relationships is different than expansion and contraction in your business world, which is different than expansion and contraction in your own evolution, etc. So it's very contextual. So the strengths and weaknesses have different meaning based on the context that you're examining, if you will.
Yeah. And it's interesting that when you went into expansion, you were celebrating it, and contraction was, so for me, what if we held them as equally celebratory? Does that make sense?
Well, that's the intent of paradox management, is to be neither for nor against,
Yeah.
therefore in a state of equanimity or a state of compassionate neutrality. I don't have to be for one or the other.
Yeah.
What we typically want to do is, and there's also what's called polarity blindness. Until you start looking at the strengths and weaknesses of both, one might avoid contraction because you are polarized to its negative.
Yep.
And polarized to the positive side of expansion, when they are strengths and weaknesses of both. So actually, if you go to the balcony, theoretically, you can hold both. And then this model requires, to install it in your unconscious, is you actually walk that loop. You imagine it on the floor, you put it on the floor and you walk the loop. And while walking the loop, you can say, I can allow both expansion and contraction, and neither are a statement of who I am.
Right.
Yeah, so there's a whole process, and it's a 12-week course to actually install it with my friends Ragini and Robin. And what I'm planning to do is just do kind of like a mini course, a wake up to what the possibility is. And then if someone wants to do the 12-week course, they go sign up with those guys. So it's me getting clear about my role is to wake people up and not to hold their hand through the coaching process to get there. So I might refer them to one of y'all. And then
So let's talk.
When you start talking success, you know what my mind does.
Tell me.
Well, let's look at success, and what's the opposite?
I don't know.
One of the opposites could be failure, right? So then you look at, well, what are the benefits of success and failure? Because we avoid failure. I will say, I have avoided failure. Like, don't even start it unless I can walk through to the success and know that I can do it. And if I can't see it all the way, I may not do it. But I've had to fall in love. I am falling in love with the draft, if you will. The first step, the second step, the third step. But success and failure have to go together.
Maybe. I think for me, it's about taking the next step. What is the next step? Okay. So, because I'm a word nerd, I always go to the dictionary and ask, gee, what do you have to say about this? And of course, it tells me. And for some reason, our dictionary tends to be a little bit on the negative side. Um, and um, and as Teresa was speaking about, polarizing to define, which I find very interesting. A state or condition of meeting a defined range of expectations. I like that better because it gives you flexibility. It keeps you in flow. Because for me, a defined range of expectations is in continuous flow. It's not stagnant. And I think that goes back to my project management days where you're constantly adjusting timelines and budgets and assignments. And success is tied into our definition of it. And our definition is tied into values, visions, how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about what we're here to do in the world. And intrinsically tied to the path of evolution, of our being. And let me put context to that. If we take a step in a direction that we believe is optimal for us to express our purpose or our mission, and we feel that full body positive response to that step, we'll categorize that as a success. And it becomes a being defined, or the unity consciousness defined affirmation of direction. And always, as I weave through this module, is what is my legacy? What do I want to leave behind? And legacy doesn't necessarily mean when I'm dead, but what about in a conversation? What's the legacy you want to leave behind in a conversation? What's the legacy you want to leave behind when you are choosing what you want to do with your time and space? What's the legacy of your environment? How does your environment make you feel? So, where have you attached success? And the reason why I bring this up is because it helps us to define the default societal beliefs that still have a voice in how we move through the world. Like a lot of people, success is money. How much money I have. And for others, it's toys. For others, it's experiences. So when you look at success, where do you assign it? Is it in relationships? And if it's in relationships, what is a successful relationship? And that's a big one because relationships are not linear. They ebb and flow and dip and dive and climb and soar and crash and burn and do everything in between, right? So that goes back to, how can you show up fully vulnerable and available and connected and create success in relationships? And is there a different standard for family than there is for friends or a partner or a child? Are we more forgiving for the children? Do we tolerate more to create a successful relationship with the child? And always it boils down to, how do you feel? Again, we talk about, of all of our tools, feeling, our mind, our spirituality, our intuition, our mind has the least reliable assessment, right? Feelings can't lie. Our intuition is communication from all sources. And spirituality is the unity embodied within you. So if these other sources of information want to inform you of what's optimal for you, and your mind says, oh, but that doesn't fit into the narrative that I've created for you, which one has which one has the louder voice, right? And being attentive to that. And is this your own? Or is it a co-creation based on you're in relationship with somebody, or this is your child, or this is your friend, or this is your coworker, or this is, what about that implied agreement that you have with the other person? How do you create success so both people get their needs met? And when do you say, okay, that can happen? And how do you renegotiate success in the relationship? And how much compromise is needed? And when does compromise tip into overgiving or over caretaking? So the first question to ask is, where do you define success? Where do you define success in your own life? What is success to you? Where do you see how success has been defined for you? Those ancestral lines that we're still dragging along with us. And is it a nuanced measure, or is it an on-off? I feel 60% successful in this relationship. I feel 40% successful in my creative endeavors. I feel, and how do you move the needle? Maybe that 40% success in your creative endeavors is actually 80. Maybe it's a perspective shift. Maybe that relationship with your brother who you think is just a pain in the ass is actually more successful than you think. And it's by virtue of the boundaries that you've created with them. Maybe that is a successful relationship. These are those underlying beliefs that sit in the back of our mind that we communicate to the universe, often unconsciously. Right? We often are communicating these needs, wants, desires for success in an area, but we're doing it unconsciously. And the moment we shine the light on what that unconscious success is, we begin to have an intentional relationship with it. And it moves from being a default belief to one that we have choice around. And this includes beliefs that are born from childhood, beliefs that come from ancestral trauma, beliefs that come in karmically, that we created for our lifetime. So this Ralph Waldo Emerson quote I just love, because to him this is success, right? This is the legacy he wants to leave. And he's touched all the relevant areas of his life. There's another lens, right? What areas of your life do you want to create success? Maybe you're done with the career thing, so no energy is going in that direction. Maybe you're redefining your career. Maybe the universe is leading you in a direction that you went, what? We're going where? And now there's a dance of creation to identify how that feels good in your life. So as you begin to look at the different areas of your life, look at what you find successful in that area. And what you'll see is also what doesn't feel good. So what is brought to your attention? And how can you get more intentional? How can you infuse the situation or the topic or the place in your life with more intention? And one of the easiest ways to do this is to use the lenses we've created. up until now? What do you value? If you value connection, are you creating connection with every interaction? Or are there situations where you just don't feel like you can do that? If you value integrity, do your actions reflect your definition of integrity? You get to make up the rules. And this is the playground. Everything that we have claimed now moves into intentional manifestation and creation in your life. And as we talked about earlier, those I am statements, powerful. Where do you say, what do you say to yourself? To support success in whatever area you've defined that you want to explore shifting your relationship in. Using the tools of self-care, expansion, contraction, going within and doing the exploration, and then taking it out into the world, seeing how it's received. And remember that when we, as we're moving through this exploration, especially in the area of relationships, we will even subtly change our energy and change our response, which changes the game that we've defined with that other person. So be gentle with both of you, right? Because if you change something, and you could be transparent and say, hey, I am looking at success in relationship. You are my favorite cousin, and I really treasure our time. And I want to use our relationship as a tool for me to learn what works and what doesn't work. So I can be more successful in relationships. Now, you're going to have to find the right person. I could actually do that with my cousin. She's pretty dope. One of my favorite people on the planet. But could I do it with my sister? No. So finding the people to partner with, to reflect back to you, right? It may feel great in you, but how is it received? How does it play out in the world? And what can they teach you from this new perception? Is that making sense? So life reflects you and it happens for you. As you make subtle adjustments in certain areas of your life, become more intentional, more specific in what you want to create, life's going to reflect back. Yeah, you're on track. Life's going to provide opportunities. It's happening for me. Staying open to the feedback that the universe gives. And back to the I am statements, I am successful. Declaring that in whatever area you want to review success in, and always being measured by how it feels and how the world's responding to you. The moment we shift, the universe responds. The moment we begin this dance into intentional creation, the universe will bring to you what you need. Life will happen for you. And pay attention. Pay attention to how you feel, what you think, what your inner dialogue is. Pay attention to what your intuition tells you about the situation. We often find radical truths when we move into the inquiry about ourselves and how we want to. Okay, hang on. What they're saying is we also learn about others, and we see where we have whitewashed or cleansed or allowed behaviors or situations to perpetuate simply to keep the peace. Does that make sense? What are we tolerating? Does it serve us? Does it not serve us? And with the new information comes choice. Wow, I had no idea that I was compromising. And most of the time I didn't mind. But sometimes it was too much. So understanding when it's too much and then choosing. And again, do you have the relationship where you can have the open dialogue, or is it a subtle change that you introduce as time moves on? So what are the containers that you want to examine success? It could be generative, could be about what do I want to do next in my business, right? Could be relationship, could be family, could be soul driven. What's my mission? Help me get clarity on my mission here on the earth. How do I manifest that? How do I create success? How am I moving more clearly and firmly towards success? What does that look like for me? Do you want to inspire? Do you want to help people change their lives? Do you want to make the earth a happier place by tending to plants, animals? Do you want to feel good? How do you want to feel in whatever area you choose? So start looking at the containers. Let me stop sharing. And where do you want to examine success and become intentional in your life? What does this topic evoke for you? Any thoughts before we close?
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
We've all been there. We've all had success,
Mhm.
but it's more of stepping back and really looking at where we are now with the idea of what our containers were.
Yeah. It's stepping into your power,
Mhm.
and that takes consideration.
I'd like to share this with you, Teresa, but after we had our sound session with Nancy Hops, I already had her book in my pocket,
Yeah.
in my house. And I spent 2 days going through it very rapidly and doing a lot of reflecting. And one of the things that she provides out there is some prompts to script your own healing meditation. And she defines different areas. She includes relationships, health outcomes, possessions, finances, global healing, and creative self-expression. And that's the one that really triggered me because finances are an ongoing concern with me for many, many different reasons. But what came out in that particular piece just blew me away. And it's not real long, but basically it was, I cannot even quantify the people I have touched with my unique talents and gifts. I always have something I can say, do, be, or express the wonders of life. I am oh so grateful for gifts I have received, expanded, or benefited from, and manifest with unending ideas, creations, and opportunities. I am a millionaire when it comes to my creativity. There are so many possibilities and opportunities. I will never miss my creativity. Stick with it.
I love that. It is so profoundly beautiful when we recognize something within ourselves. And that includes a tarot reading. Like you touch people, you change lives. And who could have seen that, Cindy? Right? Like out of a million things you could have selected. Right? Amazing. So play. Don't make it work. Play with the inquiry. What is the container that I want to create more intention around? What is the container that I want to create more intention around? And then explore the why. What you want to do and why. And then when you start feeling it, I'm getting a big rush. The universe is going to tell you how. What is the container? Why? How does it make you feel? And let the universe bring in the opportunities to land it in 3D. All right. Anything else before we close?
Yeah, I think we also need to make friends with failure.
Yeah, it's a great teacher.
Success doesn't exist without failure existing. And
Mhm.
failure doesn't exist without success existing, so they define one another.
Yep.
I'm looking at Ragini's book called Unflappable, and under the success dilemmas, they include gain versus loss, win versus lose, wealth versus poverty, affluence versus lack, disposable income versus debt, competition versus cooperation, individual versus team, analysis versus intuition, and it goes on and on and on. Just dilemma after dilemma that we unconsciously deal with. And we
That's
want
living in the or. Let's move into the and. Yeah, let's live in the and. Let's embrace all of it, right?
What's that resource, Tess?
it's called Unflappable, how to stay centered no matter what. By Ragini, Ragini, Michaels, Michals. It's on Amazon. It's a little book, but this big.
Mhm.
Thank you.
See?
And it is making friends so that you can hold both
Yeah.
and not be fighting for one and fighting to exclude the other, because you don't get to. The universe is, this plane of existence is based on duality. Got to go to the balcony to get to the oneness. And
T, did you?
context is really, really important. As you said, Teresa, the context for it makes very different relationship with each of those.
Yeah.
I think yes, 1,000% agree about learning from failures. And then there's forgiveness of failures too. So, because we know too many people that dwell or like to bring up your failures time and time again and use that as a weapon. So it's weaponized, which also then brings up the point sometimes where people get jealous of other people's success, whatever they deem as success. So that's an interesting one too. So it's, again, holding on to yours, but I do know that I have to forgive my failures too. So I'll learn from them, but forgive them too and let them go.
Yeah.
Compassion versus criticism. You can there's just factory setting.
Well, and what have I learned from that? Because invariably, what may feel like a disaster, when you can step back a little bit and be objective, it's like, oh, I guess I was supposed to learn this or this or this.
Yeah. Well, and that's it exactly. That is living in the and. It's taking what others or you may have defined as a failure and seeing the value. Everything happens for you. It may begin in duality, but live in the and. Live in the and. And all of a sudden, what was once defined as a failure becomes your greatest asset. When you look back at the challenges and the traumas and the failures, they are your biggest teacher because we tend to remember them. Right? So that's the dance. That's the opportunity. How do you move into the and? How do you live in and forgive yourself and love yourself and find the wisdom? And yes, we drop back into duality, but that is temporary if you choose, or you can live there. So how do you transcend, which is what Ragini teaches. She does it from the duality perspective. Living in the and. Trust, love. That's where they all live, in my experience. All right. Thank you, guys. Love you guys.
See you in a couple hours.
Yeah, we'll see you in a couple of hours. I'm gonna go for a walk with my dog.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.